Episode 87. Don't worry, I'm here. Dario was more powerful than Lucas. In that case, she wondered, why had he asked Lucas to stay by his side? It was quite strange. Before Jade could sort her thoughts, Dario was embracing her. Jade looked into his face. As he spoke, she heard him blame and worry in his voice.
Didn't I tell you? You must let me know where you are at all times.
Dario narrowed his eyes. I didn't know that it would be like this, Jade said, feeling confused. Just when she began to clench her nails into her palm, Dario pulled her hand open and kissed the tears at the corners of her eyes. As he began to lead Jade out, they heard a displeased voice from behind them.
No one can leave here today.
Bruce held his fractured hand against his chest and stood up, shaking. He looked at them with rage. He was still holding the knife tightly in his good hand. Dario didn't even turn his head. He kept guiding Jade out the door. Bruce, furious at being ignored, caught up to them. When he walked out the door, he was met with a great surprise. Lucas stood right outside the door, stretching his muscles and cracking his knuckles. A rare look of happiness appeared on his face.
Today I can show off my skills, right?
He asked with a smile. Dario looked at him. There was a dangerous look in his eyes. He said lightly,
As you wish.
That's great. Lucas grinned broadly.
Who are you? What do you want?
Bruce couldn't help but take a step back when he saw Lucas. Lucas's eyes were sharp and murderous. As he entered the dressing room, he locked the door behind him. Only the two of them were left in the small space. Then Jade heard a scream coming from inside the dressing room. She knew it was Bruce's scream. Jade nervously clutched Dario's arm, but he seemed unconcerned. He leaned down and gently kissed her forehead. He comforted her, saying,
Don't worry, it's okay, I'm with you. Don't be afraid. I'll take you home.
I'm sorry, Mr. Foster, I've caused you trouble again. I'm useless. Jade lowered her head guiltily and buried her head in his arms. From the day she met him, she seemed to have been giving him nothing but trouble. Little fool. Dario was worried and helpless at the same time. He walked her back to the car. In less than a minute, Lucas had solved the problem and walked out. Bruce was lying on the ground and could not move anymore. The two cameramen had left a long time ago. Now there were only a few people left.
What did you do to my brother? I won't let you off,
someone screamed. Miss McCoy was preventing Amelia from entering the dressing room. She looked into the dressing room. She saw that Lucas had already left, so she let go of Amelia's hand. It seemed that there was no need to stop her from entering. Dario had been afraid that Amelia would faint when she saw the bloody scene, so he asked Miss McCoy to stop her.
Miss Stevens, you should take care of yourself first.
Miss McCoy looked at her coldly. She thought that now Amelia would know who she had offended. Lucas walked out looking disappointed. Miss McCoy raised her eyebrows calmly, as if she was already used to the scene. Then she asked Lucas,
How is it? He's not dead, is he?
He's too weak. I thought he could last against me for a while, Lucas said, shaking his head sadly. Ever since he left the army, no one could beat him except Dario. Life was too boring. This explained why he followed Dario, because Dario was the first person to defeat him after he retired. It's not too late for you to call an ambulance. Don't worry, he's not dead yet. He's at most half crippled, Lucas said to Amelia. Amelia was so frightened that her face turned pale. She rushed into the dressing room, and then everyone heard a burst of wailing from the dressing room. Lucas looked at Miss McCoy cautiously. He seemed to have suddenly thought of something and whispered to her, Did you discover anything just now? Miss McCoy knew what he was referring to. She shrugged and pretended that nothing happened. Actually, he hardly needed to ask. She must have seen Dario swaggering out with Jade just now. Amelia had seen it clearly as well. Lucas thought for a while, and then explained. Actually, the relationship between Mr. Foster and Miss Winslet is rather complicated. I hope you don't say anything. Don't worry. I didn't see anything today. Before Lucas could finish, Miss McCoy interrupted him. Lucas nodded. This woman's EQ and IQ were very high. No wonder she was so successful. Miss McCoy said to him in a condescending manner, You are very violent.
Can you find a wife? But you are very cold. Can you find a husband? Lucas snapped back. It seems we have nothing more to discuss, Miss McCoy said coldly to him. Her eyes looked fierce. He had insulted her. But I still have to thank you for calling. When did you figure it out? Lucas asked. If it wasn't for her phone call, perhaps they wouldn't have arrived in time. The consequences would be unimaginable. Jade could really cause trouble. Dario actually didn't want the people at the Milken agency to know about his involvement, mainly because he didn't want Jade to think too much about it. He didn't want her to think that she hadn't been invited into the Milken agency on her own merits. I just realized today, Miss McCoy answered. She had thought the car looked very familiar. Her guess had turned out right. Mr. Foster, we're at home. Let go of my hand, said Jade. Dario had been holding her hand tightly the whole way home and in the elevator. Many people were watching them. Jade felt very shy. Dario ignored her and clutched her hand even tighter. Only once they were inside did he gently lead her to the sofa, and Jade began to calm down a little. Dario stared at the marks on her face. His eyes became colder and colder. Then, without saying anything, he took out the first aid kit and carefully took out some gauze and antiseptic for her face. Mr. Foster, I'm sorry. I've caused you trouble again. You must be very busy. I'll clean up the cuts myself. You should go to work. Jade looked at him guiltily. She was about to take the supplies herself when Dario stopped her hands. Don't move. Dario held her hands firmly with one of his hands. He used his other hand to continue skillfully tending to her face.